Well, hello again, YouTube. Welcome to a long and chatty video. Today we're going to be talking about the new MG-30, specifically as it relates to the firmware update. Brand spanking new version 4 just came out yesterday. Today is the 14th of January 2023, and if you are a new MG-30 owner, today's an exciting day because as we look at the firmware release history, the last version of the firmware, version 3.23, came out in May of 2022. So here we are. Here's the update. I am at newxfx.com. You can see there is a firmware update guide, which will give you some information about the firmware update. I got to tell you, there is a new MG-30 patch exchange, impulse response exchange fan group, which is on Facebook, and that is the place where NUX MG-30 users get together. It is not moderated by NUX employees, but it is a filter where NUX firmware update crew will pay attention to what people are saying and choose to fix some of these issues via the firmware updates. So if you've got a problem or if you can't figure something out, this is the place to go. Use the search function. You'll find your answers there. You also find a file section, which is packed full of custom patches and free impulse responses, all kinds of useful stuff. I do have to warn you, it's not moderated very well. As we will see, NUX is not a English first language type of organization. And there is some typical, how do I put this politely, opinionated and not always positive behavior exhibited by the members at this forum. So if I recommend you go there to download something or to learn, keep in mind, it's there's not always helpful or positive commenting. And one of the points that one of these guys was making was, if it ain't broke, why fix it? Why would you go run out? Anybody that came in that said, hey, I just did the firmware update, all my patches are gone. He's like, well, you didn't read the instructions. Why'd you run out and download it? I'm waiting. I ain't gonna do it right away. I'm gonna wait. And then he got 18 hearts, thumbs up, loves, flowers flying from other people who are going to wait to download this. When I look into these types of things, the first thing that comes up is, hey, are you on the latest firmware update? So it is what it is, and I'm about to share the release notes, which will very clearly illustrate everything that this firmware update has to offer, so you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to go through the process. And I'm going to be talking about that, so keep in mind this is going to be a long video. Firmware update 4 release notes comes with the Lone Star amp model. Looks like Texas, looks like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Looks like I'm going to slap a tube screamer in front of this and be happy. Free amp? Yep, that sounds like, where do I sign up? Where do I download this? I want that amp model in my collection. New tuner and looper habits, remembering what I said about NUX not being an English first language organization. Yes, MG-30 will save the last setup of the tuner looper when you quit. So your looper stereo versus mono, normal recording versus auto recording, the drum style, the tempo, etc. Your tuner, your chromatic, your guitar style tuner set to A440. All of this is going to be remembered if you install firmware version 4. This is sounding more and more appealing. Press knob 4 in edit mode to revert to the last settings. So let's say you have your favorite patch and you want to try to adjust something, and you get in there and you're messing around, and pretty soon it doesn't sound anything like your good old favorite patch. Well, at that point, fret not, merely hit press knob 4 when you're in edit mode to revert to the last save settings. Boy, this is really appealing. Now, there is a MIDI continuous controller that controls the wah-wah engage or disengage. So we can turn our wah on and off via MIDI, and also through firmware update version 4, you can use this control switch number 4 to engage and disengage the wah. Whereas you see, oh, they already had that on button 1. Well, no, that's the wah-wah. That's the expression pedal is 1. So you set it up that, yeah, I want my wah-wah here with the Clyde McCoy model, and you can turn it on and off over here, which is super, super cool. As it was before, you didn't have that option. So that's firmware version 4. And I've got to say, I had a big problem with their reverb freeze. You can freeze the reverb, and anything in any audio data that's in the reverb at the time will continue to play as long as you hold down the freeze button. Well, depending on what model of reverb you choose, that audio, that wet sound, the frozen sound, there was an offset or a deficit ranging from 18 decibels too loud to 12 decibels too quiet, depending on. Most of them are way too loud. Then there was one where it was really quiet. Now, if I was in a cover band and I only played Sweet Home Alabama, Last Dance with Mary Jane, and then I did my Pink Floyd Time and to Breathe reprise, I would have no need for a freeze reverb, but you know what? That's not me, and I would love to use the freeze reverb, but it's either way too loud or way too quiet, and I had brought this up, and I was attacked. So I made videos demonstrating that, hey, it's 18 dBs hot on this patch is 12 dBs quiet, and they came in and said I would never, it's just fine. Now, this isn't Nuix. This is just guys in there who, like I said, it's not a very nice place. There's a lot of infighting. There's a lot of people attacking other people simply because they're different. One guy had an Arabic character username, and he came in and showed he had a plate that he had put over his display to protect it. And this guy, one of the guys that particularly loves to come and attack people, said, "Oh, I love all the sea monkeys swimming around in there." And I'm like, how is this being moderated? How are these mods not just, like banning that guy for a day or a couple of weeks for just attacking this dude? And the dude comes in and says, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English, isn't my first language." And then he doesn't respond because his response in the first place, it was just negative. It was just hurtful and harmful. So I have to warn you, while I'm recommending the Nuix MG-30 fan page, it's very poorly moderated and people are allowed to really act very childish in there. So keep that in mind. You can go there and use the search function to find answer to your queries. Everything has been answered there as far as setting up and operating this device. There's also a file section where you can have access to user patches and impulse responses. And more recently, I put together a patch bank of 48 acoustic guitar, IR, and acoustic patches, which you can go there and grab those. But I got to warn you, if you're going to be going there, it's that type of place. So over here at newxfx.com, we have the firmware update guide. We have Mac or Windows versions of the firmware update. We update the firmware, and we also have to update our quick tone editor software because the old version of the software will no longer work with the new firmware version. Make sense? And you say quick tone. Well, that's this software here, which we can go in and edit with our mouse. You hook up a USB-C cable directly to the Nuix MG-30, and then you're able to save patches, name them using your keyboard rather than bend over and make all your patch changes through the front panel of the MG-30 using all these controls. And I got to tell you, it is a really intuitive, easy to edit device, but having the software is a dream come true. It's really awesome. Now, there is some additional information as far as what I would recommend you do if you're going to go through with this update. Because I see people on the forum saying, "Hey, I lost all my custom patches." And then we get users saying, "Well, did you even need to update it in the first place? What was broke with it?" And it's like, that's not helpful. That's going to waste everyone's time. That's just negative, and that's asinine, and they should ban that guy for a day so he learns you. That's not what this place is about. It's not about just mudslinging and throwing your opinions around and who's got the biggest e-peen, you know? But apparently it's just not moderated very well. So I would recommend, grab the firmware update guide, grab the firmware update itself, and a copy of the firmware, the software. You're not going to have to worry about the driver. The driver is still good. Then there's release notes will explain what you're getting. And I'll take you to my new X folder and show you some things which may be helpful. Where is my new X folder? Here it is. So here's the firmware update. We'll go to the last one, version 3.2.3. And we see we have the release notes, which tell you everything about it. On this last release, I believe they had the Vivo amp model, which is a Eddie Van Halen 5150. And this looks like it's frozen here for me. There is an update guide, which will show you to power up the unit and hold down the up and down button as you power it up, and it will go into firmware update mode. Then you activate your device updater software, and this comes when you'll download a RAR file, and you unrar it to this folder, and it has the actual update. It has the release notes, which tell you what is in it, and then the guide to tell you how to do it. So you will fire up your MG-30 and hold down the up and down to access the update mode. Then you can turn on the device updater software, which will ask you to select the file. So you go ahead and navigate to wherever you have stored this. You select the update and go ahead and hit update. And then it takes a while. On my computer, which is an i7, it took 15 minutes. We don't want to unplug your cable. Ideally, you would do this with a battery backed up laptop, because if there's a power failure or somebody trips over the cable, we just want to be smart and let the firmware update follow through and finish on its own. At that point, you unplug the USB and reboot the device. And honestly, there are some additional steps which I wanted to talk about. So the first thing I would recommend that you do, there is something called Ghost Backup. You go in through Global, and there's a grid that shows up like Brady Bunch style. And in there, you can access this Ghost Backup. And what that will do, it will record, there's an internal memory on here. So this has nothing to do with the computer. You do this when it's unplugged. The Ghost Back will save all of your custom patches and all of your impulse responses. Then at that point, you plug the unit into the computer, pull up your QuickTone software, and back up. That's over here. You back up all your patches. You'll save them all to a folder. Another thing I like to do is pull up the library of impulse responses. They give you 30 slots to save impulse responses, along with each patch having its own slot to add your own custom amp, or a speaker cabinet, excuse me. Those are called impulse responses. So besides, let's say you don't want to use any of the ones that come with it. That's what they're showing here is the built-in impulse responses. You can download ones that are different. Some might even be better. So you fill up a library of 30 of those, and that's a specific page on the MG-30. And then you can pick whatever you want from that library or from your own stash. But it's nice to have that library built in, because then you don't even need the computer. You can change cabinets on the fly. And I believe that's backed up through the Ghost Backup. Don't quote me. I personally would pull that page up on the computer and take a screen capture of it. So I have a record of what did I have in my library. So when I go through the firmware update, if it doesn't get backed up, I can manually perform that backup. This is just my suggestions of going the extra mile, so you're not going to have any regrets after you do the firmware update. Make sense? So, first step, ghost back up through the front panel. Second step, connect it to the NUX MG-30 to the computer and do the quick tone, back up all your patches. Next step, we're going to download the QuickTone editor software and the firmware update and our release notes. Then we're going to perform a factory reset on the NUX MG-30. Then we're going to plug it in while we're holding down the two buttons, go into firmware update mode, activate the firmware update. It's going to take 15 minutes to perform that. When we're finished, make sure it's all the way finished, because it'll look like it's done and maybe it'll have another 30 seconds. You need to be able to look at the computer screen and see that it says successfully completed. Because I jumped the gun and did it a little early, and then this thing was messed up until I redid the firmware update, which took an additional 15 minutes. It looked like the line was all the way there, and I had waited and waited and waited and waited, and I got impatient. And boy, saw some other people had made that same mistake. So, again, forgive me for making this video the length that it is, but this is a lot of information for me. At this point, you power the unit down, unplug the USB, power the unit back up, perform another factory reset. Then you can go try your ghost backup. And if that fails, well, you have all of your patches backed up via the computer. And if your library's empty, well, you got a photo of it, so you can go to your stash of impulse responses and drag and drop and fill them up how they were, and you'll be good to go. So I hope that information was helpful. It's up to you to read what firmware update 4 has to offer and consider whether or not you want it. Personally, I think that there's other things in here that maybe they don't mention. Someone in the forum said the wah-wah sounds better and clearer. So who knows? All I'm going to say is I'm the type of user that makes a personal choice to make sure I'm always have the latest firmware edition. So that's what I'm going to be working on. I was planning on recording tonight, and I've been remaking this video to try to get the time down on it. But it's very difficult to make this video quickly. It's a lot to cover. Now, one of the really cool things that the NUX MG-30 has is acoustic guitar amplifier and acoustic guitar impulse response. So this is where they have physically modeled the body of an acoustic guitar and saved this in a file. So you can, the NUX MG-30 comes with 3 acoustic guitar. It comes with 3 of these acoustic guitars. And so what this enables you to do, let's say you have a acoustic guitar that it has a plug in it with a pickup in the piezo. Well, when you plug that in your recording device, you're not going to hear the body of the guitar. That's what's missing. And that's what the impulse response is. And it makes it sound like a real acoustic guitar in the room. It sounds fantastic. So what I did, and I got to tell you, the 3 acoustic guitar impulse responses that NUX gives you are excellent. But I went and downloaded a folder of acoustic guitar impulse responses and made 48 patches for the NUX MG-30. We're going to talk about those, and I'm going to tell you how you can obtain your own copy of this patch set. So the acoustic guitar IRs, they're Dreadnought, Gibson Hummingbird. This Holy Grail was incredible. And so was the Martins. Man, the Martin D28 was something else. DC16 OM28, nylon stringed acoustic guitars, Ovation Celebrity, Taylor's, and Yamaha. So basically, about half of these patches are wet. The other half are, it's, how I set this up was the noise gate barely on, a little bit of the Ross compressor. The amps, there's 2 different NUX acoustic amps. one or the other of those, and then the IR. And I only chose IRs that were really extraordinarily different because within the same pack, they're often really close sounding. So to give you 6 of them when I could just give you one, I chose to just give you the one because they all sound so much the same. I didn't have the effects engaged. And again, you can go through here and do whatever you want. You can change this stuff all to your taste. But what you're going to get if you download this, half of the patches just have the gate, a little bit of compression, the acoustic amp, and the impulse response. And the patch will be named for the guitar that the impulse response was made from. There is a EQ, but I've got it bypassed. It's set tastefully to enhance the acoustic guitar. And then the rest of the stuff is shut off. Now, on about half of them that are called wet, control is scene 1, and that's no effect. Scene 2 is reverb, and scene 3 is reverb with the delay. Now, I set these with the mix at 4, meaning 96% dry, 4% wet. So that's this acoustic guitar patches. It's 48 acoustic guitar patches. And if you want this, you can download, you go to the Facebook, type in NUX MG-30, and it'll come up. There's a few groups, but the one that has the most people is the Patch Exchange and Impulse Response group. And in that file section, you'll find it's called Acoustic Guitar, 48 acoustic guitar patches. And that's what I made. It took me a whole day and a whole night to put that together. So if you're interested, if let's say you've got an acoustic guitar that has a piezo pickup and you never were able to get a really good sound from recording it out of that 1/4-inch port, well, you're gonna be. If you own an MG-30 and you get these patches, you'll be blown away at how good they sound. So if you're interested in getting those, I told you where you can get them. It's the file section of the NUX MG-30 Patch Exchange, Impulse Response Exchange. It's a Facebook fan group, and I also warned you about what you can expect to see, the type of behavior. It's not really moderated very well, and there's just some kind of, I don't want to say typical internet guitar player syndrome people, but for lack of a better word, that's what I have to say. And the thing about it is it only takes one apple. And 99% of the guitar players that are out there on the internet are great. But then you'll run into that one guy who's, you know, if he sees somebody with an Arabic typeset in their name, he's going to attack them. You know what I mean? And that's just not cool. So this isn't me with some personal vendetta trying to come at some guy sideways and get back at him on the fan group. I'm recommending, hey, you can go to this place, you can get my patches, you can learn, you can find answers to all your questions if you use the search function, because basically any question that any user would have has already been answered multiple times at this place. So with that, it's a wonderful resource, but it's unmoderated, and there are some bad apples and just some negative, the wrong type of attitude posting that goes on at this place. So now it's up to you. Is it worth it for you to go through this? I realize it was a lot of information, but if you go in blindly and you just do the firmware update, you know, and you don't realize it's 15 minutes and then you get done and all your patches are gone, you're going to be salty. So I hope this was worth it for you. Thank you very much for letting me do all this work and do 8 takes of this video. It's like a minute shorter than my longest time. All right, you guys, hug your pets, stay cool, stay warm wherever you are. Hug your pets. That's the most important thing. And peace.